Time to start talking about the ANS, which is actually not the American Narcoleptic Society. It's the autonomic nervous system. So we just finished dealing with the somatic nervous system and somatic senses, which had to do with your skin senses and moving your skeletal muscles. Now we're moving to the autonomic nervous system, which is the nervous system of your internal environment. And remember, what's going on with this initial slide? What are the images there? Remember, there are two divisions of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. What was the nickname for the sympathetic nervous system? Fight or flight. That's my youngest son right there. For years he begged me if I would take him on a plane ride, and I finally did, and he never asked to go again after that experience. Okay, so the autonomic nervous system, let's review for a moment. The somatic nervous system dealt with skin senses. We have somatic senses, and then the movement, the motor portion of the somatic nervous system had to deal with skeletal muscles. This was our external environment. So we found out what was happening around us. Our skin gave us information about pain and pressure and temperature and stretch and so on. And then moving our skeletal muscles allowed us to navigate through our environment, to manipulate our environment, to deal with it, to interact with it. In contrast, the autonomic nervous system is our body's internal environment. So input to the ANS comes from autonomic sensory neurons, which convey information from blood vessels and viscera. So again, autonomic sensations, knowing when you have to pee, having kidney stone, pain from kidney stones, pain from, appendicitis or something, the feeling of being full after you've eaten a lot of food. Those are internal signals coming from your viscera. Remember, that's just a word for your organs, all right? So this is coming from your body's internal environment, information is. And then the motor portion of the autonomic nervous system, which really autonomic sensory is its own thing. The autonomic nervous system is motor, the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and we are controlling our body's internal environment. Things like pupil dilation, blood vessel constriction, heart rate, bronchodilation and bronchoconstriction, digestion, all these internal motions, secretions, whatever. That's what the autonomic nervous system is controlling. Most ANS functions are in fact unconscious or involuntary. Go ahead, prove me wrong. Make your heart stop beating right now. Yeah, see, that's why your autonomic nervous system is involuntary. Because if you could control it, you'd screw it up just like you've screwed up the rest of your life. So thank goodness your body does it for you. Remember that in the somatic nervous system, a single motor axon traveled directly from the central nervous system to a skeletal muscle. Came out of the ventral gray horn in the spinal cord, and the myelinated axon went all the way out to a skeletal muscle, where it innervated motor units and caused them to contract, the whole thing we already know about. That was the somatic nervous system. In the autonomic nervous system, the motor pathways consist of two neurons. The first one we call the preganglionic neuron because it comes out of the lateral horn of the spinal cord, and it synapses on cell bodies that are located outside of the central nervous system. Remember, a ganglion is a group of cell bodies out in the peripheral nervous system. So the first neuron therefore goes to a ganglion. We call that preganglionic because it's before the ganglion. And then the second is an unmyelinated neuron. So the first one is myelinated, the second one is unmyelinated. It goes from the ganglion to the effector organ, all right? So it takes two jumps to get there in the autonomic nervous system. Two neurons, not a single one like the somatic motor nervous system. And there's a big exception here, and that is the adrenal medulla. Case, oops, I talked over that. With the adrenal medulla, we have, it's like the somatic nervous system. We have a single myelinated axon that goes to the adrenal medulla. That's because the adrenal medulla is really like a ganglion of the autonomic nervous system, in particular of the sympathetic nervous system. So we'll mention that again. Let's just pick up from here. In the somatic nervous system, remember we released acetylcholine at the neuromuscular junction. That was the neurotransmitter. In the autonomic nervous system, we still have acetylcholine in some cases, but we also have epinephrine and norepinephrine in others. All right, so that distinction is going to be an important one because they generally will identify the two different divisions. Not always, but usually. So the ANS does have two separate divisions: the sympathetic, the fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, the rest or digest. Rest and digest, whatever. So remember what's going on here. Sympathetic is the nervous system of crisis. Something's happening. You've got to respond to it. You've got to survive. Parasympathetic is, there's not a crisis. We can relax, okay? So both of those divisions are maintaining homeostasis in your body. Now most organs, not the adrenal glands, get dual innervation. That means they receive both sympathetic and parasympathetic neurons. So for example, your heart. If it's not a crisis situation, your heart doesn't need to beat rapidly. You don't need tons of blood getting out to your body. So the parasympathetic division, right now, if you're just sitting there, farting and thinking about sex, it's keeping your heart rate down around 70 to 75 beats per minute. But when the Chupacabra comes through the door, you need to run, to fight, to survive. The sympathetic nervous system will immediately jack your heart rate up so you start getting more blood to your tissues, all right? So dual innervation, that has to be the case. Your lungs, parasympathetic, constricts the bronchi. You don't need lots of oxygen if you're just sitting and resting. When the Chupacabra comes through the door, you need a lot of oxygen to make ATP. So the sympathetic nervous system will stimulate your bronchi, the tubes in your lungs, to open up to get more oxygen. And that's going to happen in organs all throughout your body, except for the adrenal gland, which is what I was talking about before. Only the sympathetic nervous system goes to the adrenal gland, which is really a ganglion of the sympathetic nervous system. And it releases epinephrine and norepinephrine into your bloodstream. You can see it in that middle panel there for sympathetic. That's the big exception. At the adrenal medulla, sympathetic causes the release of norepinephrine and epinephrine into the bloodstream, causing powerful effects throughout the body. As we'll see in Bio 202, once something gets into your blood, it goes everywhere in your body within a minute, even faster, but within a minute it's gone everywhere in your body. So the moment the adrenal medulla dumps epinephrine and norepinephrine into your bloodstream, it's going to all of your internal organs, going all to your skeletal muscles, going everywhere almost immediately, all right? So that's the way the sympathetic has such powerful instant effects, all right? And there you go, the Chupacabra. That's another one right there, yeah, just its sister, I think. Chupacabra, known as the goat sucker. So there it is, killing a goat. There's one feeding on a goat. Oh my God, the Chupacabra. Watch out. Watch out when you're out at night alone. Always be looking over your shoulder. So sympathetic versus parasympathetic effects. This is a big deal. And I'm going to emphasize this, and I want you to make sure that just off the top of your head, instantly, you could name 5 sympathetic effects or 5 parasympathetic effects. They're really very easy when you think of what the nervous systems are for. So let's walk our way through this diagram here, this illustration. Sympathetic nervous system is preparing you for a crisis. You have to survive. So what's it going to do to your pupils? Dilate them so you can see better. If the Chupacabra is out there, you need to be able to see it, all right? It inhibits salivation. We don't need to digest right now. Forget about that cheeseburger you had for lunch. We don't care right now. We're trying to survive. Not only that, but saliva is mostly water. If you're surviving, you're going to be using a lot of skeletal muscles probably. Your body's going to heat up because remember, heat is a byproduct of the manufacture of ATP. And you're going to need water to perspire to cool down, all right? So bronchial dilation, going to open up those tubes to your lungs, going to increase your heart rate and increase the contractility. Contractility is the forcefulness with which your heart beats. Increasing heart rate and increasing contractility means we get more blood to our tissues faster, which is what we need to do. It's going to inhibit digestion. Again, who cares about digestion? We're trying to survive. We're going to stimulate the liver to turn glycogen back into glucose, Because in order to make ATP, we need oxygen and glucose. So what do? We dilate the bronchi and we stimulate the liver to release glucose into the blood. So we got tons of oxygen and glucose now. Once again, stimulates the release of epinephrine and norepinephrine and dopamine as well into the bloodstream. It's going to inhibit urination and defecation. All right, we don't need to deal with those right now. We're trying to survive. And interestingly enough, for sexual function, it's the orgasm and ejaculation division. In other words, if you're having sex when the Chupacabra comes through the door, you need to finish right now. So that's what sympathetic does. Parasympathetic is going to do just the opposite. Going to constrict the pupils, going to stimulate salivation, going to decrease heart rate and contractility. You're resting, there's no crisis. Constricts the bronchi, stimulates digestion, stimulates the gallbladder, which is attached to your liver, to secrete bile, which assists in breaking down fat so that you can digest them. And it also will stimulate urination and defecation. Now's the time we can do that. It's not a crisis. Let's take care of that now. And likewise, parasympathetic is the nervous system of sexual arousal. All right, so this is summarizing everything we just did. I say for the parasympathetic, you can remember an easy way to get a few effects right off the top of your head. Remember SLUD, salivation, lacrimation, urination, defecation, and digestion. Or you can remember SCPPB, which is slobber, cry, pee, poop, and burp. All right, so that's the parasympathetic. In terms of dual innervation, again, just take a look there. Look at all the organs. So on the right, we see the parasympathetic. Notice it's sending neurons to all of your organs. And on the left, see the sympathetic. It's likewise sending neurons to all of your organs. That's what dual innervation means. It has to be the case. For the sympathetic to speed up your heart and the parasympathetic to slow your heart down, both of them have to have a neuron that goes to the heart. All right? Remember, the big exception is the adrenal medulla. That's only sympathetic. They're both simultaneously active as well. It's not as though one is on and the other one is off. They're both sending out low levels of signals. It's really a matter of which one is dominating. So if you're just sitting at home right now, not doing much, well, the parasympathetic is more in charge, so it's more dominant. But once again, when the Chupacabra comes through the door, or maybe it's El Cucuy, when El Cucuy comes through the door, sympathetic jumps into action, all right, and it becomes more dominant. So don't think of it as being each one being on or off. They're both active to some extent at all points in time, all right? Each branch keeps the other in homeostatic balance. That's the whole idea. They work together to keep you in homeostasis. Over or under activation puts you out of homeostasis, all right? This is the nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is the nervous system of homeostasis. And sympathetic and parasympathetic are its two arms. That's how it does what it needs to do. So which of the following is not a result of parasympathetic activation? Lacrimation, urination, perspiration, salivation, or defecation? Are you following along? Which one of those is not parasympathetic? Right, perspiration. You perspire in order to cool the body, and that's going to happen when sympathetic kicks in.